Hey, Dave from HeadGames here, and today we're going to go over the one that kind of started it all for me back in 2002, the Honda B Series. Keep watching. All right, so I just want to take this time to talk about the history of HeadGames with Hondas because, well, it's important to know where all of this comes from. It's not just we're picking up a Honda head and I'm going to port it, and this is all from history of doing this cylinder head for a couple decades. Back in 2002, I opened up a phone book into the yellow pages looking for speed shops that might need cylinder head work, and I called Impo Performance. They did Honda heads. I just came from Mucci's. I had not seen a Honda head yet, but I was curious and I really needed just cylinder head work. I just started HeadGames, and I met Savlione. Savlione was running the IDRC. He was running NHRA, and the car was fast. But we were about to make it faster, and that's exactly what we did. We won championships after that. We won I don't remember how many championships, but with the help of Vince Tiaga from Golden Eagle, and then this is like going way, way back, obviously, but Vince Tiaga from Golden Eagle and Sav, myself, we really did a lot of stuff. Forget the flow bench. I was able to see what works actually on the car and not worry about the flow bench. Because like I did a 50-degree exhaust valve seat, which would suck on the flow bench, but man, that car actually picked up from it. It just wouldn't last. But I had to do with guides and all this stuff. There was a lot that went into it, and I learned a lot. And actually those guys run IMSA for Chevrolet now. So Vince Tiaga and Savlione are part of the Cadillac and the Corvette program, and they're kicking ass over there too. So I'm just so thankful I got to know and learn with some of the brightest minds, young minds at the time. So back then we were running a hot rod class. The hot rod class was big tire, front wheel drive, not like the sport front wheel drive cars of today, but a lot like it. So the sport front wheel drive where it just runs a smaller tire, but they are making about 400 horsepower more than we were in the early 2000s. So back then we were making 900 to 1,000. I think we squeaked up to like 11, 12 before the whole thing ended. And now we're making like 14, 1500, sometimes up to 16, 1700 horsepower for running a competitive car in this class. Some of the things that were problems back then are still problems today. And that is something that we're going to go over, probably not in this video, but in the next video when we start talking about Valtrain. But I learned a lot from back then. I learned what to do, what not to do. This thing is like muscle memory to me. We've actually digitized this head before with somebody else. Now we have our own machine, so we're going to cut it on our own machine now. So you and I, we're going to fully port it together. Let's go. Of the B Series heads, the B18 is actually my favorite. One of the reasons why I enjoy it so much is that the injector faces the backside of the valve. When we go into the port here, I am going to take this guide boss out. You'll see some shops that either they try to shape it with the guide in it, or they just mow this whole thing down with the guide boss. That is definitely not something you want to do. You definitely need to keep the full length of the guide in it, but the guide boss, I have not found any issues with just removing it. By keeping it in, I have found that we have cracked heads when you try to install the guide with a press fit, and the way you shape this could cause an issue. So I don't like to cause issues, and I don't want to do all that. So I don't want to try to fix it. So what we're going to do is we're going to mow this thing out. We're going to enlarge the port. Now, you'll also see some shops that make this thing gigantic. If you've been watching this channel, you know that it's just not something that we do. We're going to do a lot of reshaping. I'm going to show you the burrs I use. I'm not going to show you the exact sizes, but we're going to open this all up. We're going to reshape the divider, widen up the short turn. Let's look at the rest of the head. Here's the exhaust port. And one thing I want to point out first is that the outside port, so this is the number 1 port, versus the inside port is different. Do you guys see what's different about that? So this is the outside. Bingo! You'll see that this divider here, this part right here, is raised comparatively speaking to this port. So this port is more flat right here, And then this one has a little raised piece right here. So we're gonna make these the same. Then we're gonna take the guide bosses out of it. Now we take the guide bosses out of this one because, well, there's just not enough room for activities with them in. And so we're gonna take them out. So the B18 has a little bit different of a combustion chamber than the B16. So the B16, this is all open, and this is the B18 where this is a closed chamber, and you have these hot spots right here, here, all around the C. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay this back, lay this one back, and we are gonna blend all of this into the combustion chamber. We are not gonna change the outside diameter, but we are gonna change everything that is going on the inside. Let's go over what I'm gonna port with, and that is my Makita GD0603 grinder. And I'm gonna use the HeadGames 1/2" burr, and I'm gonna also use the HeadGames Super Spiral burr, the 3/4. This thing is gonna hog out most of the material. So this is what we're gonna use pretty much to rough the whole head in, and then we're gonna go back in with the HeadGames 1/2" burr and tidy it all up. Time for me to stop blabbing and start grinding. Grinding, thinking back then, we learned by trial and error. Engines were blowing up left and right, rods were coming through the blocks. Manley had just come out with their B-Series Turbo Tough rod, and that saved a lot, but we could just test every valve job, every port shape, and we learned really fast. The short turn radius is critical. Too sharp, airflow separates. Too soft, choke top end flow. The balance is everything. I think one problem that people have when they're porting is that they use too small of a stroke. If you're watching me, you're seeing that I do very large strokes, but I also keep it within a certain area, and that area, you have to keep it moving. You can't stop in one spot and just try to shape it one little area. You have to do a big area in order to shape it right. Unless you're making a trench, which you don't want to make a trench everywhere, you need to keep the grinder moving. When I'm porting, I'm always putting a lot of pressure on the grinder, but you have to keep it moving. The faster that you move, the better it's going to be for you. A lot of people get stuck and they stay in one spot. This is what I'm talking about. The reason why I get rid of these guide bosses, not only because it is crack prone, but you can't widen the turn. I don't know why guys leave it in there. I think that widening the short turn would help you more than that. See here that I hit it. I hit it with my grinder because I can't straighten this wall out without, you can see it right here too. See how I can't really touch it without it hitting here. I think you're leaving a lot on the table by leaving it in. All the burrs that I've shown you today are all available on HeadGamesMotorworks.com. All right, here is the OEM, and here is the HeadGames port I just did. You saw me go in here with the 3/4 Super Spiral burr, and I roughed it all out. What I didn't do on camera, what you didn't see, is me going back over it with a 1/2" at a slower speed in order to make this a little nicer. Blend it all in. Here you got the OEM, and you have the HeadGames port that I roughed out. Notice that I put a fin in here. There's not a fin in this one. So I put a fin in the floor. I widened the entire port, And this thing is ready for sanding, but we're going to do the exhaust first. If you remember earlier in this conversation, I showed you that the problem with this is you have to port both of these exhaust ports because they're totally different. This one doesn't have this big hump that this one does, and the divider is more facing forward on this guy, and it's facing this way on this one. Now they do mirror, so I only have to port two, but they are different. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to talk about one thing that I hear all the time, even in the comments here or anywhere really, is that you need to sit there on the flow bench and make sure that each port is matched and flow matched to each port so that one flows exactly the same as the other, which is total BS. They don't do it from the factory. You can't make that up. You can't do what you're thinking that you want to do. People don't do that. You can't sit on the flow bench. I mean, I guess you could if it was a V8 and all the ports are the same. So if you took an LS, yeah, you could get, if you really wanted to, you could, but realistically, the shape of the port, if the shape is not there, then if the shape is not there on the first port, it's not going to be there on the second port. And you're not going to have the same flow. You need to have it close to, but I mean, some of the Subarus are 30 to 40 CFM different from each other, and they run fine. I don't think that it matters as much on a fuel-injected new engine, something with tuning. I just don't think it matters as much as some people make it out to believe. I almost think that it's more like Bigfoot. If people are always like, man, you gotta look for Bigfoot if you're in New Jersey and you're in the woods, but I've never seen Bigfoot. I've never seen a problem with just porting this. Yes, you can flow each one. Yes, they do flow close to each other, but they're never going to flow the same, and I've never seen a problem. I've made big power, I've set world records with this, and never seen that to be an issue. I wanted to show you before I do the combustion chambers another example of how the OEMs do heads that are just not the same. And that is, you can tell in this combustion chamber that this here is not the same as this here. So what I mean by that, hopefully you guys can see it. It's a video, right? So I don't know if you could actually see it, but this wall here is a little bit more pronounced than this wall here, but this wall you can see is very pronounced. So the chamber is moved this way, and it is not the same as this one. The 4G63s do the same thing. The number 4 is not the same as the number 1, and then this one is the number 1 and number 4 are different than 2 and 3. All right, now we're going to move on to sanding this thing, and I know a lot of guys are going to be watching this and they're going to try to do their own cylinder head because that's the Honda route. And what I want you to know is on the short turns of this head, very easy to mess up. And if you use a cartridge roll, a straight cartridge roll, you will absolutely square the top of it. And that's why I have this in my hand. So when I go to sanding, I switch it to my Cleco grinder, and I use my Cleco grinder because it has a front exhaust. So a lot of the grinders have it coming out of the back. The air is hitting you in the face, and it's hitting you back here and hitting you in the face. But on the Cleco grinder, and you can buy other grinders, they have air leaves the front of it. So it's a front exhaust and it blows everything away from me so that way I can still see my work. And the other attribute, besides this thing could probably take a tree down, is that I went to Home Depot and I got myself some 1/4-inch prop rod. You cut it to length, you cut the slit here in the center. You see that slit right there? And what that slit is for is we use some handy roll. So you can get handy roll at McMaster. This is 60 grit handy roll. I cut it in, about 11-inch, 10-inch length. And I'll fold it a little bit here. I fold it just because of the hole that I made here, right? What I'm doing is making a cartridge roll by wrapping this up here. And the way this is going to help you is because it's malleable. Because it's malleable, it is not going to leave a ridge at the top of your short turn. So you want to make this, you don't want to use this at a top speed, you want this at a slow speed with this handy roll before you touch it with a cartridge roll. Actually, I never touch the short turns in this head with an actual roll. I always hit it with one of these. Like when I'm final sanding it, I'll hit it with this again just to make it look good. And on the exhaust, I'll use a 120 grit hand roll, but I never use an actual cartridge roll. And going off that idea, I'm going to sand it from this side too. I'm going to sand it up to the turn because the biggest thing I don't want to do is flatten it. And you can absolutely flatten it from this side. You can flatten the turn if you're using a cartridge roll, and that's why I use the handy roll. I blend everything in, then I'll use the roll up to here. And that way I don't have to worry about messing up my short turns. Now I'm about to sand it with my 3/4 cartridge roll, and I use the 3/4, same thing as doing the burrs when I use a bigger burr and I use a bigger cartridge roll. The biggest thing that I'm trying to do is not have to change the shape because I already made the shape and I want to make it easy, and I don't really want to work harder. I want to work smarter. And if you can see here, like it is the circumference. So that way when I sand it, this thing comes out just like I want it. All right, let me give you another nugget here. You saw that I sanded up to that divider that I made, that little fin there, right? I sanded up to it, and then the last second I did this. Last second I blended it all in, because if you just sand like this, guys, that is going to make this a hump. So you're going to make this like a C, and you don't want it to be a C. You want this to be a nice straight line. The only way you can do that is you blend up, and then the last second either you exit, which is something I also did, and then you can also just go over it real quick. But you don't want to keep working the port back and forth because that is going to change the shape. When I'm sanding, I'm using a lot of pressure. I can almost push the cylinder head off of the bench because I'm putting so much pressure on it. But again, I keep it moving. You do 60 grit on the intake, 120 grit on the exhaust, but I rough it all in with 60 grit, and then I go back over it with 120 on the exhaust and 120 on the combustion chamber. I leave it 60 on the intake. And we are done the bun. So this is the OEM port, and here is the HeadGames port. So this is the one I just did. Notice I took out the guide bosses, and they're gonna make nicey nice. And we have some fins in there, no fin, and let's check out the rest of the head. Here's the combustion chambers. You can see, remember all the hot spots we were talking about on both sides, and here, all removed. So this is all. Now, one thing I didn't do is I didn't finish saying the combustion chamber, and that's because really I don't need to. When the digitize, when we go to do that, it doesn't care. It doesn't care really about how it looks. It just cares about how it feels. So it just has to be smooth. And the intake port, this is the OEM. And here is the HeadGames port, all sanded. See, I put a fin in here where there's not one. Fin. And this thing is ready for Matt to digitize. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us today, but it's not going to do it for us on this build. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Toodles.
HeadGames!